Hey man, this is R.C. Blakes, and I'm so glad to be coming to you today. I'm presently in Brooklyn, New York, and I attended a real estate conference where there were thousands of young people learning how to build wealth through real estate. And my brother was blessed to speak to them, and he talked to them about conquering the Grasshopper Complex. I want to talk to you about conquering the Grasshopper Complex today. Stay right there. I think you'll be blessed.
I'm antiquated because I believe a man is supposed to take care of his woman. I don't care how much money your woman make. A man is supposed to have his mind set on taking care of his woman.
Talk. I mean, this may be a bit crude, but I mean, I don't know no other way to say it. I want to talk about booty calls. Hey man, what's up? I am so glad to be able to talk to you today. This was just kind of like urgent in my spirit. And rather than go live with it and run the risk of not having a great reception, I decided to pre-record it and to upload it for you. But I was blessed today to be in this real estate conference where there were thousands of young people who are learning how to build wealth through real estate. And my brother was the keynote speaker for this particular event. And he talked to them about a subject matter that I've heard discussed for many years by many different preachers relative to the Grasshopper Complex. And I thought, as I listened to it, I thought how fitting it is for the audience, for my particular, what I call you guys is my extended family. And for where you are in terms of your mindsets, you know, in terms of coming out of poor relationships or restructuring your life at middle age, like I had to do at 40. I had to start all over again, combing through all of the lies that society feeds you about what you can be, what you can do or cannot do as a woman, as a black person, as a Hispanic person, even as a white person in some instances, and how we have to constantly fight the mentality that the world constantly imposes upon us, as the Bible encourages us to be transformed by the renewing of our minds and don't be conformed to this world. Most of us are struggling to not be conformed to the limitations and the stagnation that the world has assigned to us. And so, with that being said, he was dealing with Numbers chapter 13, verse 33, all the way through Numbers 14:1, where it says, "There we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. And all the congregation lifted up their voices and cried, and the people wept that night." Here you have the backstory to this is the children of Israel have gotten to the promised land, the land that God promised. God worked miracle after miracle to deliver them from Egyptian bondage. They were physically delivered, but psychologically they were still incarcerated. And they get right to the promised land, and they send over 12 spies to go and check the land out. 10 come back with a negative report saying, "We can't do it." 2, Caleb and Joshua, came back with a positive report saying, "Let's go up at once. We can do it." But the congregation chose to believe the 10 negative reports. And so some theologians say it was as many as 3 million Jews or 3 million Hebrews that wept that night and whose hearts were turned from stepping into the promised land experience because they had a grasshopper complex. You notice they say here, when they got there, they saw the people of the land, and the people were giants, and it said, we were in our own sight as grasshoppers. We saw ourselves as grasshoppers beside these giants, meaning we saw the giants as being so superior that they could simply step on us, and there's no way in the world we can take that land. Now, a complex is, listen to this very carefully, a complex is an internal perspective on life or situations that creates a social reaction or restriction. When a person has a complex, it is an internal perspective. It's something that the person sees in his or her mind that creates a social reaction or creates a certain restriction. Now, the grasshopper complex, I define it like this. The grasshopper complex is a self-limiting mindset that makes a person cower at the sight of greater opportunity. And the grasshopper complex makes a person hide from the challenge of greatness. When one has a grasshopper complex, it will cause that person to cower, to become a coward at the sight of greater opportunity. So they're afraid to step into it. And they will also hide from the challenge of greatness, because there is no greatness without challenge. Just like when you read the full context of this story relative to the Hebrews, when they got to the land of promise, they discovered that there were giants there. There is never a promise without giants. You cannot step out of slavery and into rulership without defeating certain giants. And most of these giants live between our ears. The greatest battles you will fight will not be from this perspective. The greatest battles you will fight will be from this perspective. The greatest adversaries you will encounter are not people out here. The greatest adversary you will encounter is your own twisted thinking in here. And so it was with these people. They saw themselves as grasshoppers. Now, the thing my brother brought out today, which was very, very interesting and powerful, he brought out the fact that grasshoppers have wings, but they don't fly. They hop around, but they don't really fly. Though they're built with wings, they have the equipment, but they do not have a corresponding mindset. And could it be that God has created you with certain equipment to go to certain levels, but it is your mindset that is holding you down? You know, while you blame it on this and you blame it on that, because grasshoppers have a tendency to blame everything and everybody else, but they rarely, if ever, really look inside to see how their limitations are internal and self-inflicted. They have wings, but they do not fly. Now, it's interesting that the grasshopper shares the garden with the caterpillar. The grasshopper is born with wings and cannot fly or will not fly. The caterpillar is born without wings, but somewhere in its mind it says, I believe I can fly. And so its mindset causes it to evolve into something greater than it presently is. While the grasshopper is born with the equipment, but the mindset limits the grasshopper's experience. In the same garden, you'll find the bumblebee, who scientists say is anatomically not feasible for flying, but yet it flaps its little wings as if it's never heard or conceived of the idea of not flying. Why would God create one with wings that would not or could not fly? And so the bumblebee disregards scientific rhetoric, and it flies anyway. But the grasshopper does not fly. Now, let's look at the components of the Grasshopper Complex. Number one, when you look at the story of the Hebrews who were here at the Promised Land and perceived themselves as grasshoppers and refused to take ownership of the Promised Land because of their own internal limited perspective, the question has to come, where did this come from? How could a people be on the brink of greatness and then just reject it? Number one, it stemmed from a limited historical experience. This generation of Hebrews had only known slavery. They had been enslaved by the Egyptians for 400 years. So they did not have a personal historical context, not an immediate historical context of being kings. And so when they are faced with the opportunity to step into rulership, it is a culture shock to them because the only points of reference they have point them back to we are slaves. And how many times is it in our lives that we limit our potential? We are limited in terms of what we will step into because our history says this is all your mama ever did. This is all your grandmothers and your grandfathers ever did. This is all you've ever known. This is all your race has ever done. How could you dare dream of doing more when your historical context says these are your limits, these are your boundaries? And there are many of you that are watching me right now who are restricted by a limited historical experience. Because God is challenging you to go places that your people have never gone, to do things that nobody that looks like you has ever done. And when you look back over your history, there's no fuel for your future because God has called you to blaze a trail where no one has gone before. And the Bible says in Isaiah 43:18 and 19, this is the Amplified Version, it says, "Do not earnestly remember the former things, neither consider the things of old," your history. "Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Do you not perceive and know it? And will you not give heed to it? I will even make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert." So though you may have a limited historical experience, that does not negate the reality of the preferred future that God has planted in your heart. What you see in your spirit is real, even though there's nothing in your history that you can grasp at to validate or to substantiate your present ambitions or vision or mission. The thing that is in you is not based on your history. It's based on and in your destiny. Listen to what David Schwartz says. This is a quote. He says, "The thinking that guides your intelligence is much more important than how much intelligence you have." There are many brilliant people who are extremely educated and extremely intelligent, who are limited by thinking that is rooted in a limited historical perspective. And so their historical perspective is limited. They're not able to really capitalize on all of the intelligence and the brilliance that they have, because I'll read it again. The thinking that guides your intelligence is much more important than how much intelligence you have. And there's some of you that are watching this right now who will have to conclude that you've been making contemporary choices based on an antiquity or realities from days gone by. So you look at grandmother and mama and so forth and so on, and you're making current decisions based on former realities. And so the intelligence that you have is not being fully maximized or actualized because it's based in a limited historical perspective. Hope this is making sense. Number two, components of the complex. Number one was a limited historical experience. Number two was a stagnant circle of underachievers. These 10 guys went out and spied the land, came back with, intimidated and afraid, and came back with this negative report, and they infected 3 million people with the same negativity. This was a nation of people who were all in the same boat. Nobody could inspire the other. And there's some of you that are watching this now, and hopefully you'll realize that your grasshopper complex, let me define grasshopper complex again. It is a self-limiting mindset that makes a person cower at the sight of greater opportunity and hide from the challenge of greatness. There are many of you that will conclude that your complex, your grasshopper complex, is the result of a stagnant circle of underachievers. You are surrounded by people who are underachievers, and they want to submit you to the same fate. Though you're dreaming about more, though you can see more, though you can feel more, you can't reach for it because your circle won't support it. Now listen, this is another quote by David Schwartz, and these quotes come from the book, The Magic of Thinking Big. David also says the mind is what the mind is fed. If you're constantly surrounded by people that are feeding you negativity, if you have a circle of stagnant underachievers and they're constantly feeding you this negativity, the mind is what the mind is fed. When you get around people who are next level, when pigeons begin to have discussions with eagles, their wings begin to expand. When pigeons begin to have discussions with eagles, their chest pokes out and their wings stretch out. But when eagles begin to take counsel from pigeons, they shrink and they limit their potential. Because the mind is what the mind is fed. And when you have a stagnant circle of underachievers, it will feed the grasshopper complex. Look what the Bible says in Matthew 15 and 14. He says, "Let them alone, they be blind leaders of the blind. And if the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch." You should never be a person that limits yourself to a circle that is as ignorant as you are. And all of us are ignorant to some extent. That's not a put down on anybody. We're all ignorant to certain things. So we must all seek out circles that know certain things that we don't know. Circles that can help us to evolve, to expand, and to grow. So the components of the complex are, number one, a limited historical experience. Number two, a stagnant circle of underachievers. And then number three, the loser's language was the third component of this nation's grasshopper complex. They had a limited historical experience. All they had known was slavery. So when they're challenged with becoming kings, there's no context. There's nothing in our history that suggests we can do this. They're limited by a stagnant circle of underachievers. They hadn't seen anybody around them that had ever been a king. Not really. Not really. Moses, but he's a man of God, so, he doesn't count. And then thirdly, they were the victims of losers' language. The losers' language arrested their courage to try. When these 10 men came back and started speaking all of this negativity, it's amazing how 10 men could speak something negative and it spreads throughout a nation of people of millions. It's amazing how negativity, pessimism spreads like wildfire. And before you know it, a whole nation is infected by the loser's language. We can't do it. They're better than we are. They're bigger than we are. We're like grasshoppers in our own sight, so we know how they see us. We better not try. But the Bible says in Proverbs 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue. and they that love it shall eat the fruit thereof. If you love to speak death, that's the fruit your life will reap. If you love to speak life, that's the fruit your life will reap. When you're speaking, you're either breathing out death or you're breathing out life. And losers use certain language. I dare you to pay attention to the language of everybody you encounter. You will begin to detect the people that are building you versus the people that are breaking you with their what? Language. You must analyze the language used in your presence. It's empowering you or it's draining you. And then number 4, the fourth part of this complex, and then we'll move to the end of this, is that once they, you know, the number 1 was the a limited historical experience. Number 2, a stagnant circle of underachievers. Number 3, the loser's language arrested their courage to try. Number 4, their fear put chains on their courage to act. Because all of this came together, their circle, the language used, and it all created what? Fear. And their fear is what prevented them from taking action. They made a choice not to go and to take action. Let me tell you something. God can promise it. God can sign off on it. But if you don't take action, you will never realize it. That's for those of you that want to spiritualize everything and you believe that you can pray and it's going to just miraculously happen. No, 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 no. There's a part that God plays and there's a part that you play. And when the devil works to create fear in your life, that fear comes to prevent you from taking action in the affirmative. When God speaks to you and faith comes for you to what? Take action in the affirmative. Fear comes to prevent you from taking action in the affirmative. In other words, fear makes you say, even though God said it, even though God signed off on it, I won't try. I'm not going to do that. Faith comes and it makes you say, God said it. I believe it. That settles it. Boom. Let's make it happen. Nothing will change in your life until you overcome the fear to take action. You got to overcome the fear to take action. Anything great in your life is going to make you shaky. Anything great. But you have to get to a place where you become courageous. And a courageous man, a courageous woman is not a person that is minus the fear, because fear it's a human emotion. It's a human experience. But courage is knowing who you are, believing in yourself and believing in your God to the point that there's no way in the world I'm not trying. And then God meets you and you discover that you have divine partnership. After they heard the report of the 10 negative people, they were baptized in fear. Their fear made them settle for less than God ordained. And listen to what God tells Joshua in Joshua 1:9. He says, have not I commanded thee, be strong and of a good courage, be not afraid. Neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. God is talking to Joshua and the next generation that actually went into the promised land and inherited it. Now watch this. Here's another thing you got to remember about the context of this story, is that this generation that was afraid was the generation that was born in Egypt as slaves. God had to allow that generation to die off, and then God promised to raise their children up. But their children were not born in slavery. Their children were born right outside of the promised land. So they had a different what? Historical context. They didn't know what it was to be whipped and to be driven like animals. All they knew were the promises of God and what's possible. So while their parents came from a limited historical perspective, their children, the next generation, comes from an unlimited perspective on destiny. They were the children of destiny. They knew where they were going, and they realized that the potential was limitless. And so they were like, let's go get it. And so God says to Joshua, just be strong of a good courage. Don't be afraid. I'm with you. And David Schwartz also says that action cures fear. Those of you that want to overcome fear today, action cures fear. You gotta step into the thing that you're afraid of. If you want to overcome the fear, you gotta take action. Now let me shut this down with this. How do we recover? I'll give you these 4 things really quickly. Number 1, if you're sitting there and you're watching me, you're saying, man, I'm struggling with this very thing. I have this grasshopper complex, and I'm cowering at opportunities. I'm running from the challenges of greatness, and I'm settling. Number 1, you have to embrace the discomfort of destiny over the toxic comfort of history. See, history lulls us into a sleep, into a place, a comfort zone of stagnation. Or, nobody's ever done it. So, I've already done more than most. And so I'm settled right here. But this destiny calls for us to step out of our comfort zone. We must embrace the discomfort of destiny over the toxic comfort of history. You must make a conscious decision that I am going to forsake the gravitational pull of my history, and I'm going to press into the call of greatness that is my destiny. Number 2, you must intentionally elevate your circle of influencers. You must intentionally elevate your circle of influencers. You got to begin to look around your life. Like right now, in my life, I'm presently thinking about a whole new team. When I say new team, I'm not necessarily getting rid of my old team, but I'm getting ready to connect with people that can catapult me to the levels I know I'm supposed to be at. So you must intentionally elevate your circle of influencers. Number 3, you must shift your conversation to optimism. Don't let negativity come out of your mouth, because whatsoever man saith, he shall have. You will have whatsoever you say. That's a biblical principle. And when you speak negativity over other people's lives, the thing you have to understand is that while you're casting seed, or you think you're casting seed into their lives, negative seed into their lives, the seed is falling into the soil of your own reality. So I'm careful. I don't speak negative of people. I catch my mouth when I'm starting to say something negative. I catch my mouth because I have to shift my conversation to optimism. I don't use words like I can't afford. I'll say I'm not ready yet. I'm not going to use terms like I can't afford. Ooh, that much. Oh no, I can never see myself doing. No, man. There's so many things that I'm doing now that if you caught me years ago, I would have said, there's no way in the world I could see that. I don't have to see it. But if I can see it, I don't have to see it. But if I can see it, I'll see it. But if I'm using my mouth and I'm saying, I can't see that, I can't see that, I'll never see it. So I have to shift my conversation, my language. Language is important. And then number 4, you must destroy the stagnation with action. You just got to get up and you got to start doing something. You got to start doing something. And so I thought it was just such a powerful message that my brother delivered. And I heard so many people deal with this. But to see it in that context was amazing. And so I thought that it would bless you. And I hope you got something out of it. Let me pray for you today. Father, I thank you for every person that's watching this. And now, God, I ask you to just supernaturally, Father, breathe upon them and cause them to sense that something has shifted. That something has shifted. God, some of them, have no known support system. There's nobody there. They don't really have close friendships. Their family's not really supportive. And God, you are all they have. Would you step into that space with them now, Father, Holy Spirit, and make them realize that you're there, and give them that sense of optimism that I just got through talking about. And breathe upon them, God, a confidence that they will try it. I dismantle the Grasshopper Complex. I dismantle it and I dismiss it from their minds. And I cause them to think like and walk like kings in the earth. In Jesus' name. Hey man, listen, don't forget to stop by Amazon, pick up my books. So many books, man. Pick up my books at Amazon. Don't forget so much. Look at my live events. Lisa and I, if you're looking at this before March 27th, 2020, Lisa and I are going to be in London, England on March 27th and 28th with Queenology. You can register VIP, or VIP will include Friday night dinner, Q&A, hangout time with Lisa and I, and then it also includes Saturday morning, the 4 to 5 hour intensive on the 5 tenets of Queenology. Regular registration includes Saturday morning, which is the main piece. So I would love to have you there if you're anywhere in London or in that area. And also for those of you that reach out to me and you say, well, I need counseling. The son is getting me. I need counseling. I need to talk to somebody. We have partnered with BetterHelp. And if you look in the description, you'll have access to a counselor or a therapist, I think 24 hours a day, every day. It's amazing. It's amazing. And it's affordable. The link is in the description. I love you. I thank God for you. And the sun is running me out of here anyway. And remember this, man, you're on top and you're going higher. God has more in store for you. I'm R.C. Blakes. I'm trying to get away from the sun. And I love you with all my heart. God bless you. I'll talk to you real soon.